The creation of the prescription drug and sedative thalidomide provided numerous types of medical relief to ease patients' side effects from various medical conditions ranging from mild to severe. Sadly, the pharmaceutical industry around the world never saw the tragic road ahead stemming from the horrific side effects this legally improved medication would come to provide. On December 25, 1956, in a German hospital, an innocent young girl was born without ears. What caused this horrific physical deformity? That was the question doctors and medical experts throughout Europe were asking, as not just one, but multiple similar births began to be recorded during the months that followed. From that day through the present, there have tragically been over 10,000 recorded cases globally of deformed infant births that connect back to thalidomide. In 1946, the German pharmaceutical company Chemie Grünenthal was founded in Stolberg, Germany by a man named Hermann Wirtz. The goal Grünenthal set out for was to create an over-the-counter drug to address such simple symptoms as headache and nausea, to prescribe pain reliever substitute for anesthesia. The name of this drug was thalidomide. Grünenthal's hope was that thalidomide would become a household item much like aspirin or Tylenol. Something that attracted most buyers was the fact that the effects of an overdose were much less severe than other drugs used for similar symptoms. The essential purpose of it was to decelerate brain activity, slowing down pain signals, or blocking anxiety, insomnia, gastritis, and tension side effects. Before the drug was officially launched, the company gave the drug out to their employees who exhibited the symptoms it was designed to treat. It was sort of a pilot test of the drug, so to speak. One of these employees, it turned out, was pregnant at the time, and unfortunately, the first recorded baby born to a mother taking the medication was the child of one of Grünenthal's own employees. The baby that was born to this employee was delivered with a physical deformity that at the time was not connected to the thalidomide doses its mother took. Thus, on October 1st, 1957, thalidomide was made available for purchase in 46 different countries, including Canada. Early in its uses, thalidomide was primarily prescribed for being a sleeping aid. However, Dr. William McBride, an obstetrician in Australia, was the first to discover that thalidomide alleviated morning sickness. Dr. McBride started recommending the drug for off-label purposes, meaning purposes other than those given permission to be used for. Even though the drug wasn't approved for this type of use, he still went ahead and assured his patients they would be medically safe and without negative side effects. At this time, medical testing practices for the approval of any pharmaceutical drug were in place, but were not as strict as they became in the 1980s. Therefore, McBride's prescribing of thalidomide was legal. By doing this, he began to set a worldwide trend for many pregnant patients. Prescribing patients drugs that are off-label for their exact symptom is still a practice used today in many places, including the US, but only after extensive testing is conducted. When developing any type of narcotic that goes directly inside your body to do a specific job, wouldn't you want all the chemical components to be as exact and accurate as possible? Well, unfortunately, there were many inaccuracies in the developmental process of this narcotic, but the first fault in their operation was the ignorant types of testing and knowledge they used. At the time, they mostly experimented with drugs on such small-sized animals as mice or rats. The problem with this technique is that in many ways they react differently than human subjects. When testing thalidomide on rodents, they reacted without problems. There were no red flags or odd reactions. Even the embryo inside of the rodents tested were unaffected. After coming to the conclusion that it was safe, they announced that the drug was appropriate for pregnant women to use. After the announcement, thousands of pregnant women took the drug without any concern or understanding of risk. Little to their knowledge, their life, their unborn child, and their future would take a turn for the worst. The abnormalities created by this drug were gruesome and appalling, when given doses far over those tested. In 1959, it was first noticed that women who took thalidomide more commonly had children with birth defects. These abnormalities include phocomelia, bone hypoelasticity, dysmelia, amelia, and others affecting the ears or internal organs. The effects of these defective abnormalities include shrinking or missing limbs, misshaped organs which can lead to heart failure, or severe nerve damage. With all the malformations put together, statistics estimate 10,000 to 24,000 newborns who were affected by thalidomide. Sadly, there were still also about 123,000 stillbirths and miscarriages, according to educational estimates. They think that this was because the previous family member taking it was not affected and it carried on into their DNA. In 1990, many mothers and deformed children started to take a stand against the governments all over the world in an attempt to ensure that thalidomide would either be banned completely from pharmacy shelves or carefully regulated in its doses prescribed, especially to pregnant mothers. Additionally, they felt irreparably harmed and desperately wanted such compensations as payment of annual medical costs to help with their disabilities, such as paying for prosthetics, surgeries, physical therapy, and more. A group who did take a stand were people who called themselves the Thalidomide Victims Association of Canada. During the year 2014, the victims requested more compensation because they found that the amount they were given was insufficient for what their medical needs were. They requested that the Canadian federal government provide them with a $250,000 lump sum payment and then annual payments of $75,000 to $100,000. During the year 2015, the Canadian federal government provided thalidomide victims with lump sum payments of $125,000 and an annual pension of $100,000. Research illustrated that most other countries around the world are still in the process of compensating the victims of their respected countries. There's still a light at the end of this long tunnel of child deformities and lack of proper compensation to individuals or families affected. Thalidomide was released as a prescription medication first in Europe and other parts of the world. It would have entered the U.S., but a few extraordinary women with a suspicion of what this medication was creating prevented what could have been thousands of more fatalities by requesting files from Chemie Grunenthal about the tests they did on animals that indicated the damage thalidomide could do. One of these extraordinary women were Frances Kathleen Oldham Kelsey, who was a noted pharmacologist and FDA employee in the 1960s. In her time at the Food and Drug Administration, she raised suspicion about the drug and helped strengthen drug laws. In her first month of working for the FDA, she not only studied the effects of thalidomide, but she also took a stand against letting it arrive in the U.S. One of her first assignments was to examine and review the widely used sleeping pill. There was something that concerned her. She read articles that reported thalidomide had caused birth defects when prescribed to mothers in Europe and Canada. Multiple times the manufacturers tried to get around her and her knowledge, yet she was far too intelligent to allow any of this to happen in the U.S. Another woman who played a major role in ensuring thalidomide would not enter the United States as a legal prescription drug was Helen Burke Taussig. In the early 1960s, one of Taussig's prior colleagues brought the concerns about thalidomide to her attention. There was something that caught her attention and created grave concern for her regarding the use of thalidomide in the U.S. and the serious side effects that it caused. She specifically held concern regarding the defects found in an affected child's heart. After traveling to many European nations studying thalidomide babies and their mothers and publishing her findings in important medical journals, she testified before the American College of Physicians in Congress on the instability of thalidomide. Because of Taussig's research and persuasive testimony, it helped ensure that it would not become a medication allowed in any American pharmacies. It also spurred President Kennedy's interest to dive deeper into the FDA developmental drug testing programs, providing them with better opportunities to analyze the effects of pharmaceutical testing on congenital defects. Dr. William McBride, a man who once thought he discovered a medical advancement, but then soon realized the awful mistake he made. He tried time and again to blow the whistle on thalidomide's destructive effects when dosed incorrectly, yet was ignored repeatedly by the Grunenthal Corporation. Despite his efforts, he was unsuccessful in pulling thalidomide from the market. Thalidomide was never approved in the U.S., so very few Americans, if any, got their hands on the narcotic. The only Americans with access to thalidomide was the FDA and some medical experts to experiment with it. Unfortunately, that didn't stop the dreadful future ahead for 40 babies. The babies were mostly the offspring of those experimenting with it, and others who were mainly the test subjects. The narcotic was eventually allowed back into the country after extensive testing was completed, and regulations were placed on those taking the drug. Thalidomide was not available in the U.S. until 1998, and then it was only used for leprosy complications. But in 2006, it was also available to help with multiple myeloma. Although thalidomide had a very dark and scary past, they found that when used properly, it can be very successful in curing certain medical problems. Thalidomide was proven to help with blood cancers such as multiple myeloma, leukemia, and myelofibrosis. It was also found to help with skin lesions like cutaneous lupus, Behçet's disease, and a couple others. The German drug is now legal, but when taking it, you must follow strict regulations. These regulations include signing a consent form, taking many types of contraception, and you must undergo frequent pregnancy testing. Thalidomide isn't just by itself as a cure, but pharmacists were able to disassemble the chemical components in thalidomide. By doing this, they were able to make other drugs that are chemically similar to thalidomide, but much safer to use. These drugs include lenalidomide and pomalidomide. Although thalidomide started out as a great tragedy, our world as a whole has learned from it. We now have much stricter guidelines for drug testing to ensure something like this doesn't happen again. We all can agree that this was a horrible time for many individuals, but sadly, we had to make this mistake to learn from something that could have been much worse. Additionally, we have found more cures for cancer and certain diseases that we wouldn't have found without thalidomide. Even though this series of events claimed and hurt many lives, it has and will save many more.